raising the quality of the quantity of the research, and by enabling the staff to create the international networks. Another aim is to raise the international profile of the university and the faculty, and also making this, we'll strive to make this kind of workshop mandatory and periodic for the junior staff. When it comes to the outcomes of this workshop, we'll try to identify basic principles of scientific thinking and research, explain the and apply the scientific methodologies, practice the searching bibliographic databases, gathering, interpret data, and summarize the others' work, and also how to prepare and present this scientific research or paper. The plan is we'll talk about the research methodology, methods, techniques, also how to draft a scientific article and publish in it, and the presentation of scientific results. Regarding the topics in detail, we'll talk about research methodology. What does it mean? The research in itself, the objectives of research, motivation, and so on. Types of research, research methods versus methodology, research process in simple words and simple terms. The types of publications, literature review, how it is done, scientific writing, manuscript structure, research ethics, authorship, and so on. When it comes to the research process, we have to make, or let's say to spot or identify the difference between research and science, because they are used, let's say, interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. So when it comes to science, it stands for the Latin word scientia, which simply means knowledge. Let's say in English or in Albania, research is another word, refers to the actual gathering of information. So the scientific method involves a process. It's a process and starts with the question, what are you going to do? A systematic approach then answers the question we raised in this process, and it usually ends with the conclusion. So the science, under these steps, the science or knowledge is then established. So research in itself is a step in the knowledge. So by being the first step. So when the question is asked, or we raise the simple question, it is followed by the research itself, and it focuses solely on the question or hypothesis. So we have to raise the question first, or let's say a research question, and then we would be able to create or write down a hypothesis. Facts are gathered, let's say, to either prove or disprove the hypothesis. When it comes to types of research, there are different types of research. So the purpose of research is to discover answers to questions through the application of scientific procedures. So we'll have descriptive or analytical research. Description, descriptive is, let's say, self-explanatory. Description of the state of things, current state of affairs. Thereby, we do do not have under, let's say, the descriptive research, we have no control over the variables. In analytical research, on the other side, we have to use facts or information available. So they are already available. We analyze them and make a critical evaluation of the material. Applied versus fundamental. The applied research aims at finding a solution. So applied research or science has to do with finding a solution. Usually a different solution from the rest of solutions for an immediate practical problem. Fundamental research is mainly concerned with generalization. That's how it is called fundamental. Conceptual versus empirical. Conceptual research is relating to some ideas or theories. That's how it's called conceptual. The empirical research, on the other side, relies on experience of observation. So there are completely different things. Regarding the approaches of the research, there are two basic approaches we may use: quantitative approach or qualitative approach. Quantitative is quite self-explanatory. Again, involves generation of data in quantitative form. It means it may be conducted in the form of survey, experimental, or any kind of simulation approach. Regarding the qualitative approach to research, is concerned with subjective assessment. Opinions and behavior is something subjective, not objective. Research methods are those methods mainly used for conduction of research. It refers to the behavior, how we behave in selecting and constructing the research techniques. Research techniques, on the other side, refer to the behavior and instruments we use in performing research operation. We will make classify the research methods and methods used for data collection, statistical methods, and methods used to evaluate the accuracy of the research results obtained. This is the summarized, let's say, scheme, or let's say flow chart of the whole research process. It usually starts with defining the research question or problem. We then move on reviewing the existing literature regarding concept theories, or let's say previous research. Based upon them, we just reformulate or formulate the hypothesis. Then we design the research in terms of analysis, collect data, analyze data, and we just carry on with the interpretation and results or reports. So this is the, let's say, a simplified or generalized scheme of the flow chart of the entire research process. We'll move just through it. Formulating the research problem or issue and the literature review. First, we must understand the issue, or let's say the problem, thoroughly, and after rephrasing the same into meaningful terms. So we haven't done anything if we just write down a simple issue. It must be meaningful and from meaningful and analytical. At best, we should, before we start, let's say, conducting a research or scientific paper, we have to talk with colleagues. You usually, let's say, best professors and so on, or people with a expertise in the field. Often, the guides puts forth the problem in general terms. So the next step, we have to examine all the available literature. It's this part. So we just define the research issue problem. Then we move to reviewing the whole set of literature. We have to go through both of them. Let's say concepts and theories and previous research. So the conceptual literature and empirical literature, or let's say early studies. The problem to be investigated must be defined unambiguously. So it must be clear-cut or crystal clear. Once the problem is formulated, a brief summary of it should be written down. We have to, let's say, explain with simple words what that does it means. A must here is that we must use extensive literature survey connected exclusively with the issue, or let's say the question. We must go through books, journals, conference proceedings, reports, and so on. Regarding the development of working hypothesis, after we are done, let's say, with external, extensive literature survey, the researchers should state clear terms about the working hypothesis. Hypothesis should be very specific, quite specific, and limited to the piece of research in hand. So we must avoid, let's say, general or generalized hypothesis. Like when the sun the weather gets warm. So this is quite self-explanatory. There is no need, let's say, to just find, let's say, clear solutions. So regarding the development of working hypothesis, again, we must discuss with colleagues and experts about the issue, problem, its origin, and objectives in seeking a solution. Let's say an original solution, not an existing solution. And the second step is examination of data and records in place. Third one is a review of similar studies in order to not to replicate, let's say, the same results and conclusions. And we must conduct exploratory personal investigation. Why? Because it involves original field interview on a limited scale with interested parties, because this research must be quite original. Working hypothesis arises as a result of a priori thinking. We have to prove it with our research, with our analysis, but we have to write it down a priori. That's it is said, arise as a result of a priori thinking about the subject examination of available data and literature. How to write? What's the way? For periodicals and conferences. So when it comes to let's say scientific and technical articles, it's a long way from its inception to final publication. Scientific and technical articles typically follow this, let's say, standard or format. It starts with the abstract, introduction section, previous research, or let's say literature review, problem formulation, model or methods and results, conclusion, references, and acknowledgements. So that's, let's say, the standard, that's the benchmark. It's a fact that many inexperienced researchers, exclusively junior researchers, start writing with the abstract first. It's clear that the abstract is already written first, but is written last. So the core of the article, we should keep in mind that is the problem formulation. So that's the core. And we must be quite specific in this regard. So problem formulation and methods we use to solve it. That's the core. Because this is the material, or let's say the piece of work that is most familiar to us, it makes sense that we start right in this part initially. Then we move on to our results, and it's a clear fact that most experienced writers or researchers recommend that you write the introduction, or we write the introduction next. So we do not start either with abstract or the introduction. The abstract should be written last. So it comes first, but it's written last. We have to revisit our working title. We have to be quite revisiting several times. For me, in my experience, I'm quite hesitating to revisit the title because I'm not starting to write down until I have a clear title. This is my personal experience, but you should, or we should, let's say, consider revisiting our working title. Acknowledgement and references can be completed after the article is written, so it's clear. Title and index words, why they are quite important. The purpose of your title, why this is quite important to have, let's say, a very interesting title. Because the aim is to grab the attention of readers and help them decide if your work is relevant to them, because title means everything. As you write, develop a list of keywords, or let's say index words. Why they are quite important? Because the reader understands why our or your work is different from previous studies. So you are not repeating, let's say, previous studies. The title must be concise with 4 or let's say 5 words or something like that. It's a fact that some journals, let's say quality journals, set a limit on the numbers of words in the title. So they just try to avoid, let's say, unnecessary words. So we must avoid unnecessary words. Also, it's a must. Almost any journal in the world will require index words or keywords, at least 4 or 5 of them, no more than 4 or 5. Abstract, why it's important? Because abstract and index words are extensively used by search engines to identify and catch your research or your application. how we will select, let's say, or use which words we will use as keywords or index words. It's quite simple. We have to think about how we would search for our article. So by which words? So these are the exact words. Let these terms guide our selection of index terms, because it's an issue to clarify which will be, let's say, index or keywords. It's important to get your title and index terms right, so that the article appears when researchers are other researchers, mainly international researchers, are conducting search in your area of expertise. The idea is to be visible. So, as I told before, the abstract is the last section we write down, because it is the condensed version of the entire article. It's a summary, quite a brief summary of the whole research. It must be kept in mind that the abstract is generally 100 or maximum 250 words long, no more than, let's say, half page or a third of full page. It's written in the past tense. We should be quite clear. Why? Because everyone knows that the abstract is written last. So it is already done. The whole job and research is already done. So it is the past tense, because the introduction is not in the past tense. Also, the abstract, we should exclusively avoid putting references. It must not include references, because it has nothing to do with the references. It's our work, it's our job, not the other's job. Use background and conclusions to help frame the context of your work. Everyone is eager to see what kinds of findings, conclusions, and recommendations appear in your research immediately as a snapshot there. Why? Readers will use the abstract to decide if your article is relevant to them, because no one has enough time to read the 20 pages research. It will take 1 or 2 hours. We should provide them a brief information or a snapshot of the whole piece with, let's say, 200 words. Be sure that how we'll do it, the abstract must convey why your research problem is important and how your work moves the field forward. What's new with this research? Because everyone needs to see and must be informed what's new with this kind of research. Reviewers also look at the abstract first when it comes to the peer review process. We should strive to make a good impression. Because there is no second chance to make the first impression. So the first impression is quite clear, must be quite strong. Regarding the introduction section, why we should include, let's say, proper information, which, let's say, answer the following questions. Why is this a new and important problem or issue? What has been done before? Because we're not the first one in this area of expertise. How does our research bring significant new understandings to the field? So what's new, what's original, what's our, let's say, scientific contribution in this regard? The reader should find enough information to understand why our research was necessary without having to refer to other source material or something like that. Because once it is no more curious and interested in that piece of information, it will just scrap it. So the introduction should be concise, just like the abstract. No more than 2 pages, 1 or 2 pages maximum. Differently with the abstract, the introduction must be written in the present tense because we are currently working on it. So start with what is generally known about our subject or issue. We have to move step by step for more detailed information, and we should end with the description of the specific problem or hypothesis the article, or let's say the research paper, will discuss. The hint is that we must try and strive to use an attention-grabbing statement. Why? To hook the reader. The idea is to use interesting wording. So in the next few paragraphs, we must refer, let's say, previous research, but not quite extensively, because do not try to include everything from your literature review. So the introduction section must contain, let's say, 5 to 6 or 7 references or citations, no more than, let's say, 5 or 6. Because everyone is prepared to see, let's say, the literature review in the respective section. The idea is to orient why let's say, the introduction section is quite important and relevant, because it's orienting the reader to the most relevant studies. Because in that part of the research, we must be quite specific with, let's say, the references. So we must include the most appropriate, let's say, references there, and the most interesting references. We must explain how each earlier study relates to our own approach. Does it have limitations? Yes, for sure. And does it make different assumptions? What's original with this approach, or let's say research? We must show our readers that our study or research builds upon or is different from the existing work, because no one would be interested to read, let's say, previous information or, let's say, existing things. Anyone is interested in grabbing or identifying, let's say, brand new information and ideas. If we have published an earlier version of this work, conference or journal articles, we must explain how the current study, let's say this study or this paper, builds upon our own prior work, because we cannot cheat, let's say, use our previous research to create new research. So we need to bring, let's say, brand new or fresh ideas. After the end of the introduction, let's say in the last section or in the last paragraph, we have to tell how the article is organized, some kind of, let's say, simple methodology, something like that. So chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, or how we have moved on with the whole paper or the research. The next step is problem formulation. Should be placed, let's say, in the first part of the article. In that place or in that section, we must describe the methods used to solve the issue or the research question. or prove or disprove your hypothesis. Include a detailed description of the problem, of the issue. So it's not said with a simple sentence. We have to be quite descriptive in this regard. We have defined all the terminology and notations used and provide equations we or you may use when we reach a solution, especially for quantitative research. The sections should be written objectively without analysis or interpretation. There is no need to draw conclusions in this stage of our paper. The level of detail should be enough to allow a reader to replicate your work. Your work must be used, let's say, for further research. Include only the most significant equations in the body, the key equations, because the rest of things, or let's say the derivations or something like implications and so on, must be described and let's say positioned in appendices. Results. Now, when it comes to the results section, we must state clear there that we have found a better solution or an original solution compared to, let's say, previously published work. If our work is analytical, we'll show results there at that section obtained from our equations. So the results are explained there. The results would demonstrate that you have developed a new solution. That the idea is that we have to keep it simple and we have to be original. These are two focal points. So results should be clear and concise, with no more avoiding unnecessary wording and words just to increase, let's say, the word count, and attached with, let's say, figures or tables, which will be used to illustrate your findings. We'll talk about the illustrations in the later section. In some journals, the results are presented as raw data, but there are some other, let's say, journals that results and discussion are combined. It depends on how, let's say, the journal requirements are. You should review the representative articles in your targeted periodicals to determine which approach is preferred. So you have to be clearly watchful what kind of journal it is and what kind of analysis they just are familiar with. In discussion, you will interpret your results. Should acknowledge for sure any limitations. There are no perfect articles. There are no perfect solutions. The idea is to be contributive and original. Conclusions, as let's say, almost the final, not the final, but an ultimate section. This section must or should explain what your research has achieved. So what are, let's say, the clear findings, the benefits and shortcomings of your solution. Keep in mind that your article and your research is not exhaustive. So it's not the final word in this word. So we all have limitations and shortcomings. Then we have to provide a summary of main findings with bullet points, preferably with bullet points, the important conclusions and the implications for the field. So because the idea is to me as a reader to understand what's the intended impact of this, let's say, research work. We should also discuss benefits and shortcomings approach and suggest future areas for research. So this is, let's say, the best contribution for the others' researches. A well-written conclusion can also help when writing the abstract. So once we just draw conclusions or prepare, let's say, the full set of conclusions, it's quite easy for us to incorporate them, or let's say the key findings within the abstract section. Illustrations, the important is quite interesting and high in terms of tables, graphs, and figures. Will help to clarify your idea and support your conclusions. It's stupid to think that we prepare tables, graphs per se. No, because they are presented there to support our own conclusions and not to show different things. A figure can quickly show ideas or conclusions that would require a lot of explanation. So the idea is that tables and graphs must be almost self-explanatory without, let's say, further explanations in the text form. Table titles and graphic captions should help the reader to understand the data. Data must be clear and understandable. What format is best for us or for our own research? It must be a clear differentiation between using tables and graphs. Table is used for repetitive data or when it's important for the reader to see exact values in terms of figures, numbers. When it comes to graph, it is quite visually different from a table. It can show the relationship between data or trends. That's the idea. So we must avoid, let's say, inappropriate use of either tables or graphs. Be sure they are readable, easy, self-explanatory, and easy to understand. Hints, thick lines, it must be clearly shown. They must be clear and in good quality or in a high quality, either in black and white or grayscale, because the majority of journals do not accept color tables or colored graphs. That's the idea. Or they may even charge you or to pay the let's say additional money for them. A poor image cannot be improved. So the idea is that what you upload in the paper will remain the same. Design your table or graphic to fit in the column format used by your target periodical. You cannot, let's say, produce lengthy tables or extremely big graphs. No, because no one will allow them. References as the, let's say, final section. References demonstrate that we have done our homework. So we have, let's say, we have been well prepared for this research paper. They support our argument that we have found a new and significant approach. The idea is that the experience shows us that there are more mistakes in the reference section of an article than in any other section because why? Because as it is left to be written last, we pay not the required attention. So we pay less attention, but it is quite important for us and for the peer reviewing process. Keeping your references accurate and complete will help then demonstrate the quality of our work. There is no quality paper research without a quality reference list. Value, it's an important part checked during the peer review process. It allows our research to be used more effectively. We have to cite only those references that directly support our work. We should not, let's say, put there irrelevant papers or work just to, let's say, lengthen the reference list, and try to avoid big names. Okay, when it is necessary, yes, but it's not, it is not done per se. So that's the idea. Your credibility is not built upon the others. Try not to cite material that has not been vetted by peer review, or let's say dubious papers. After we have drafted the article, be sure that every reference that appears in the text has a citation at the reference list, and that every citation at the reference list is included or used in the text, because any missing reference will be cached by the peer review process. Check the reference list against the original source material. You cannot go at the second hand or third hand. You have to go at right in the source. You can't use references or cite, let's say, subsequent authors. You have to go to the original author. Absolutely, there are a number of different formats when it comes to references. There are different standards used both in Europe or in America. In this regard, we must be quite watchful to check the instructions for authors that appears, let's say, in the first section, or let's say in the sorry, in each journal there is a, let's say, separate or independent section in this regard, which explains, let's say, the whole set of instructions for the authors in terms of the format, references, and so on. Just to facilitate our work, you are recommended, strongly recommended, to use reference manager software tools. The best one is Mendeley. There are many, let's say, software or tools. Mendeley is, let's say, one of the most well-known and widely used. We may, let's say, attribute a separate section in coming months to explain how the Mendeley is used practically, a short section. It's very powerful and helpful because this tool can help us to easily record and use citations or switch from different set of forms of references used, let's say from APA to Chicago, Harvard, and so on. We may easily switch by using that kind of tool. If we do not have access to the reference management tool, we do not use Mendeley or something like that, we may use author's name and year of publication. Formatting. We have to follow instructions which appear, let's say, in the journal's website. And we must, let's say, follow strictly the guidelines about the technical specifications. Type size, font, headings, column width, article length, and so on. Because these are the first things peer reviewers see or let's say examine when you submit the article. Here, regarding the formatting, the Word is, let's say, the most powerful app. We may use others, but the idea is to be quite simple. And either Mendeley is quite interfaced even with the Word. How to make the article interesting to read for the others. These are, let's say, clear and simple hints. We have to write in paragraphs, try avoid, let's say, entire sections without breaks and paragraphs. Every or each paragraph should have a topic sentence, supporting sentences that build on key message. So they must be simple and clearly understandable. Vary the length of the paragraph to make your article easier to read. A clear hint is here that a single paragraph must not exceed 4 to 5 lines, because more than 5 lines are quite burdensome. Write clear, simple sentences in the form of noun, verb, object. That's the simplest way of writing. Every word in a sentence should contribute something. Eliminate unnecessary words. So, because the peer reviewer will do it for you. A clear message. Avoid the passive voice. No, there is no use for passive voice. We have to write in active voice because we are acting, we are doing. That's the idea. So in the active voice, the subject performs the action. That's the idea. Not it was hypothesized. We hypothesize, I. So that's the way of wording things here. The active voice is more interesting and less ambiguous. That's the idea. So we must edit passive sentences to active sentences. We have to write in first person. I mean, I, we, not they. Because it's our own work. That's the idea. The abstract and methods sections must be written in past tense. Introduction and the analysis in present tense. Introduction and discussion in present tense, because we are currently doing it. That's the idea. Syntax. Syntax refer to how words are arranged in the section, in the sentence, and how they relate to each other. So quality journals are quite stringent and rigid in, let's say, honoring that kind of requirement. They want a clear syntax. So we must avoid, let's say, these common errors, unnecessary phrases like obviously, as previously mentioned. These are parasite wording, unnecessary words. Don't use this at the beginning of a sentence. It's rude. This. It can be ambiguous. Or subject and verbs must agree. When we are talking in singular terms, we have to follow with singular verbs and so on. So the economist says, and the economists say. This is purely grammar. Use words carefully and correctly. Do not use slangs, because we are talking serious things, not, let's say, fault things. Be cautious using technical jargon that may not be understood by an international audience. We may have our own words here as this part of the world, but this sounds quite strange for the rest of the world. The words that and which must not be used interchangeably because there are basic differences. We use that differently from which. So this is the clear difference between that and which. And be attentive to use comma before which. So if you see which, you have to use comma before which. Avoid the abbreviations. There are no don'ts, don't, I'll, shortened forms. No, there is no place for abbreviations. Must use simple words. Start instead of initiate, something like that, or use instead of utilize. These are, let's say, simple hints in these returns. We have to avoid unnecessary and lazy or parasite. The verbs demonstrate, exhibit, present, observe, occur, report, and show. We may go to, let's say, thesaurus or word processing tool, and we may select or use the most appropriate word, not, let's say, that kind of basic word. Punctuation is quite important because we must be quite attentive and careful in using semicolons, colons, and dashes. We have to use commas to add clarity. We use commas. The possessive singular of nouns informed by adding an apostrophe. This is purely English grammar. That's, let's say, the basic books, or let's say reference we have already used, or I have already used to prepare this presentation. This is not the whole one. This is quite a brief presentation. I'm done with, let's say, my presentation and the first part. The second part, not today, will have to do with the peer reviewing process. Subsequently, we will, let's say, as a follow-up to this workshop, we will try to use, or let's say, explore the appropriateness of this workshop since the next edition of Economicus journal. We'll try, me as an editor-in-chief, I'll try to, let's say, use that kind of presentation or workshop to for the whole peer reviewing process of the next edition of Economicus journal. And let's say the best idea. So, any questions before I conclude the whole presentation? Slides, so we can upload it and share it with each other. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention. Thanks a lot.